Professor Hijar's work has always provided those without a voice a seat at the table. This is especially pertinent when it comes to environmentalism. What we think of as the environmental justice movement has only been around in force for about 50 years. So those still under the weight of marginalization still can't get out and still can't get representation. His voice in the classroom has been a constant reminder of the intersectionality of social issues and has mobilized his students to take the teachings out of the classroom and to see them within their own lives, leaving us without a choice but to act on them. So, Professor, I'm going to give you 20 minutes from once you start speaking, and then you'll get a 5-minute warning, and then a 2-minute warning, and then a last message to wrap it up if it goes that far. Then we'll do some Q&A, but you can take it away now.
All right, sounds good. All right, well, thanks to Jack for inviting me to this. I met Jack when he was, well, he's still young, right? He was even younger, people, if you can believe that. And yeah, you could tell right away, like the curiosity, right, was there, and the passion for it, which is ultimately what this presentation rests on. So a little bit about myself and what I do. I am a professor in history, Latin American history and US history. My research is focused on workers, on unions, on socialism, on anarchism, on elites. And by elites I mean how do economic and political elites undermine the labor movement, undermine the environmental movement, and undermine any type of collective, social, group-based, communal-based movement, which is also part and parcel of what I'm trying to say here. All right, so I'm gonna start with, so my dissertation was about workers in the 1930s on the border, basically balancing power structures, right? And by that I mean, well, they have a seat at the table. How do they do it? Basically by acquiring political power. So basically what we're going here is we go right into the struggle for space. So that's why I call this basically a space. You know, some people think, well, you know, we need to work about race, we need to work on economics, we need to work on our education, and we need to work on all of these things to change the world. Or we need to work on all these things to have an idea of how to change and transform the world. However, they don't think that it starts with their own space. That basic fundamental block of any resistance effort, people take it for granted or are not aware of what power that can have if you look at a space as one more element of the resistance. You will look at space just as you look at race. You will look at space just like you look at gender. You will look at space just like you look at economics. You will look at space as a holistic approach and the resistant effort. In fact, if you think about it, space is even more important than some other things, because without that foundation block, you got nothing. So go ahead, Jack. All right, so let's give credit to some credit, right? Obviously, Mr. Harvey did not come up with the struggle for space, right? This has been going on since thousands and thousands of years. What Harvey did is frame it in a theoretical way. What Harvey did is say, hey, this is how we're gonna frame this struggle, and this is type of a new thing, and we gotta look at this struggle from a point of a geographical view. Of course, Harvey is a geographer, all right? And you know, most people think on geographers what? Oh, they're gonna do maps, and they're gonna do this and that, and geographers now are doing very interesting stuff. They're looking at how space is used, and how space is used for takeover, and how space is used for social justice, and how can either both can intersect or both can separate from themselves. But the issue of space for them is part and parcel of everything. It starts there, okay? Again, some of you might be thinking, well, this is pretty logical and evident. Well, again, people, it is not. Most people, and this is where I'm gonna go a little bit over, see the struggle for space as a given, as natural, And by that, I mean the way we see space today, which is in a capitalist way. And they accept the use of space and how we call space and the language we use to describe this space as normal. They don't contest it anymore. There are no different paradigms of how do we use space. So, okay, so it goes both ways, right? You can use space for dispossession and for domination and for authoritarianism, or you can use space for the complete different purposes, which is openness, inclusivity, sustainability, right? So so how it starts? Well, we go from the beginning in history. They start by dispositioning and disenfranchising people. So they take away the land first, people. They take away the space in which they can have self-sufficiency. And they make them, to use a Marxist term, the proletarian. They make them workers. They make them sell their labor. And this is later seen as natural. And now the idea that some have property and some don't is suddenly accepted by everybody. And this process of dispossessions are not contested and are not resisted because the idea of private property is so ingrained into us, people, that even think about something else is difficult. So this spatial takeover takes place in the subconscious level. Oh, the landlord gets his month every month. Give the rent to the landlord. That's his business. That's his business. It's a rap. It's not a rap song. It's a reggae song, right? Nobody questions that. Now we're doing it with the pandemic, which is I'm gonna take it later. Now the issue of space, now the issue of who's who, it's now beginning to be in people's heads. Because now the space that you work on and the space that you are literally will save your life or will make you sick. And it took a pandemic for people to realize how important is the space where they work and the space where they live and their community. And if they have control of this community and of this space, there will be a complete different outcome in their everyday lives. But they don't even have control of their ground they sit on. Now, again, how do you do this? With language. Believe me, people, you can make a pig look pretty with language, all right? You can do anything with language if you're skilled enough, all right? Just 2-3 days ago, Homeland Security came out with an explanation of why they were, going after people in Portland and going after people in Seattle. And through the language, they make it seem like, hey, we can do whatever they want. We can do whatever we want. By making it look like they're defending something and they are holding a bigger and a more transcendent value and ideal. And through the use of language, you completely hide what is really happening. And of course, we take language to the basic, right? Renters, owners, landlord, tenant. These are labels that they put on people to make people accept it. Another example of the use of language in racism, for example, when people refer to a bad thing as dark, when people refer to bad news as black. This, even within the language we use, we are racist, and people don't even see it. Even black people themselves use it to express the future. Oh yes, there's dark news ahead. Oh, this is a very black eye in our community, when they're black themselves. And I never quite understood this with black people. And I tell them all the time, I point it out at them. And some of them see it and stop using black to express something negative. And it's the same with property, people. Through language and through words, we make property seem like natural, like a sanctity, like something that it is positive for all of us. An inclusive thing that everybody has access to, right? When in reality, who has private property? Very few. Now, all of these people is taking all of these moves. So one of you might be asking, well, Andres, why do people do this? Why do people put people in other conditions like this? Why do we make a class? Why don't we can have a classless society? Why can't we have a space where everybody is sustainable and inclusive? Well, because we need labor, people. all right? Because you need somebody to do the work, because you need somebody to clean the shit, to pick the cherries, to put up the cement, to drive the ambulances, and who's gonna do it? The dispossessed. Because if you have a space, why will you migrate? If you have a space, why will you clean the shit? So that's what has to happen first, people, in order for the other to happen. Do you see? So again, this is not evil people thinking, how am I gonna screw Mexicans or how am I gonna screw blacks? No, this is a necessity of an economic system based on privilege. Based on privilege of some work and some don't. So how are we gonna make these people work for us? How are we gonna make people go to the army and defend us? Well, we first have to make them landless. We first have to take over the space. We have to control the space. And they do a whole wide array of things. For example, here I have public spaces, right? We have no public spaces. That's the first thing. They make sure that there are no public spaces where people can congregate. They make sure that people cannot make it to A and B without using a car or without using public transportation. That's why we have the burbs, where there are no sidewalks, people. That's why we have very few spaces in which people can congregate. This is done on purpose. Urban architecture done in a way that will facilitate consumerism and capitalism, no collectivism, communalism, and collaboration. Now, these are people thinking about these things, okay? If not, look at how the burbs developed in the 60s and 70s out of the necessity of bringing people out of the city. And we don't want the city to make it to the burbs. So how do we do it? We can't walk there. You have to drive to the burbs. Remember, you in Illinois know this. If you try to get to Chicago downtown to any of the burbs, it is very difficult, people. And you all know it. And the only transportation connects the south side with downtown so people can go to work, and the south side with the north side. That's it. The south side is not connected with each other. And the burbs are not connected with each other. They all go to the center. So they can control the space, so they can control how people move, so they can control when people move. All of this is thought about, okay? Change it, Jack. Cities, public transportation, okay, uneven development. This is another thing. Well, Andres, why can the south side, why can poor neighborhoods just have businesses? How can poor neighborhoods just, and people are thinking, today I just saw an article on the Atlantic Review that said, poverty, it's a choice. So yeah, people, if you're poor, it's your fault. If you're poor, you chose to be poor, all right? Because all of these opportunities are rare, right? So that's how they do it. So through uneven development, they make it seem like it was a choice by the neighborhood to be the way they are. When in reality, these are government policies that decide which space in which city is going to be developed and which one will not. Why? Because we need to have one nice area so we can differentiate ourselves from others. Because again, think about this. Ultimately, capitalism is about privilege. And the idea of exclusive space is part and parcel of that privilege. That's why we make nice areas, so that the lower areas and the ugly areas can look at us and say, oh, wow, we can be that. And you're in a constant search for that, instead of looking within. The classic dangling the apple when somebody's hungry, right? Just like us at the border, right? We're at the border and we see the United States and we see all the economy and we see all the wealth, but we can't go in there. So we desire it and we try for it. And that's how fucking space works, people. You make one pretty and the other not, so that the one that does not want the pretty one. Basic human psychology. Okay, the burbs. Great example of how we utilize space to screw others and to privilege one over the other and to isolate one over the other and to make sure one doesn't go and mix with the other. Right, try to make it to Naperville. Well, now you can take the Metra, right? But again, it's just neighborable to Chicago. You cannot really connect yourself with the other verbs. Of course, eminent domain, that's a very big one. And I just put it out there. Basically, you know, the government can say, this is our space. This is how important they think that is. That they have a special law that allows the government to take over any space they want to if it's in the collective and the nation's interest. So what's sanctity of private property? Eminent domain is really, if you think about it, socialist people. Because the government is taking over your land and distributing for the good of everybody. And eminent domain is part and parcel of capitalism. I'm just putting you out there so you can contrast and compare how hypocrite capitalism is. Because they are a socialist when they want to, when they need to. And of course, people, all of this stressed on fear, right? The fear of being left out, the fear of not being who I'm supposed to be, the fear of not living what I want to be, the fear of bringing my friends to my house because, you know, my house is full of dirt. I remember when I was young, because my mother in her great wisdom, we used to live in the, as Trump will say, a shithole down in Mexico City. But also in her infinite wisdom, she takes me to a private school with rich kids. So now I'm inviting the rich kids to the poor neighborhood to play the day of my birthday. You know how many show up, people? 2. 2. All right. So let's keep going. Right. And that's exactly what it is, Cadera. Socialism for the wealthy. And they do it all the time. And nobody says anything about it. When wealthy do socialism, it's all good. But when the unions and when workers do socialism, oh, don't do that. So that's the other thing we need to change and make it look, people, you're doing socialism by taking all these taxes and giving it to the rich. Pure socialism from the top. Bailing out the airlines, pure socialism from the top. 5-minute warning, damn. All right, it's Marxist, people, all right? So what does that mean? Oh, it's evil. Oh, it's gonna take the women at night and some men, right? Oh, hide your granddaughters. I don't even know. What is the problem? The only thing that makes that it's Marxist is that it is economic based, that it realizes that there are classes and privileges. That's all that Marxist means. Some people will take it as far as say, but he's anti-God. And yeah, he was the first one to say religion is the opium of the masses, but he said religion, not God. He never had a problem with God. In fact, if you ask Marx today, he will probably say, believe what you want, bro. All I'm saying here is there are privileges in society. So know and understand that the only thing that Marxist means is we are looking at class. We are looking at privilege. We are looking at money. Has nothing to do with God, bro. Change it, Jack. Now, what can we do? There are spaces of hope, but this is what Harvey does, all right? Harvey first tells us the spaces and how we get dominated, and then he tells us how to be undominated. So he gives us answers. Of course, this is another thing, people, that is the critique of Harvey. So the first critique for me is this one. He does not give room from a space of within. For example, at Northern, where Jack is going next semester, I was in a class and we were talking about Harvey. And I was thinking to myself, what about the space within? What about if you are fine within yourself? You don't need a space. And I got into a great debate with all the students and with the professor. And I finally changed my mind and say, I don't give up. The red sass, if you are fine within yourself, if you don't have a space, you're screwed. Yeah, you can be Zarathustra and you can eat your leaves and you can be outside of the grid, but you're still nothing. The only way to do something is inside. All right? That's the only way to change things. Otherwise, you are an outsider and you will be in jail or killed. That's exactly what they want. So you work within the system. Unless, of course, you want to take it, you know, and the end will be, you will be, anyway, let's not even go there. So churches, we've seen this. Immigrants go to churches so won't get deported. People go to churches when there is wartime. It is a safe space. Immigration does not go into churches. Most criminals don't dare to go into churches, although in Mexico, they steal a lot of churches. So that thing is not really. All right? People find 2 minutes. Okay, boom. Look at all of this, people. The most important here to me is urban gardens and multi-tenant housing. All right? Just like the natives did it and how a lot of the Mexicans do, we call it vecindad. There's like 50 people living in one place. Of course, you have to sacrifice, and there's a lot of issues going on, but that's the only way right now to build a space in capitalism, through collectivity. This is done in California, people. All these young people, they get a big house, they live together, they pool their resources. California is going socialist, people. Will be one of the first locations to be socialist in the world, and most of you will see it on your lifetime. Urban garden. You have an urban garden, you have self-sufficiency. Okay, change it, Jack. How? And this is the thing, people. Look what you need that most people don't have. Awareness, commitment, passion, collectivity, a state of mind that highlights these things, and courage. What I just said, people, most people lack, all right? So yeah, we're in it for the ride. So I don't know about that one, because this is like saying, oh, we need, change it, Jack. This is what we pertain to us, people. If we control our space, by logic, we control the environment, and we are stewards of that environment. And through controlling the space, we will make local laws and local zoning to control the environment on that space. And we can drive away the mining enterprises, we can drive away the pollutants, and we can do all of this within the capitalist frame by owning the space. But most young people and minorities do not think about owning. What do they think? Oh, it's so difficult. Oh, I'm not gonna get approved. Oh, I don't even know how to do it. People, I got property when I was 21. I didn't have any money, but I had the idea of, if I control my space, I can do something with my life. And that's exactly what I did. I wasn't even a citizen, people, and I was getting loans from banks. So yes, you control your space, you have control of your own life, and therefore you have control of the environment. If we don't own the space, we cannot control the environment. Wrap it up. Jack, move on. All right, a couple examples of these things do take over, people. We have the 1960 Mexican earthquake. All these people were left out without a house. They took over the spaces and public spaces, and they forced the government to build housing. And these same people are the ones that are in power now. The new left in Mexico, I don't know if you know this, but Mexico has a leftist government now. These people are the ones that got their, they pay their dues in 1985. Same with the Tiananmen Square, right? That did not went about to nothing, but that was a takeover of public space. Tenant movements in the revolutionary Mexico, it's happened again. Today, the Occupy movement and the Black Lives Matter in DC Plaza, the Seattle Free Zone, this can expand, people. This is now are giving people now the realization that there are other ways to do things, which is ultimately the point here. Go ahead, change it. There you go. The last one is the big one, people. You need sacrifice. You need to sacrifice your own comfort. You need to sacrifice your own dreams of selfishness and individualism. Yeah, your 3 or 4 cars, your 5 or 7 women, your 3 or big houses, that's over. That cannot happen. So yeah, without sacrifice, there will never be a change in the environment, people. Never. There has to be a sacrifice by the young people today, because evidently the older generation is not going to do it. So you have to either cry about that or change yourself. Change it, Jack. Space is the environment, people. You need to see it as one thing, not separate from each other. And only you will have control over an environment. You will be only green if you control the space, right? It's that simple. Otherwise, you're just going to be crying and yelling to the dark. So you have to have political power and you have to run for elections. That's that simple, people. That's how, unless you want to take down the system and be a revolutionary, good luck. How many of you will gonna last? Most of you will be dead within a year, people, or in jail, or who knows where. So that's not decision. But it can be done in pockets, which is what we're doing here. In pockets, and it grows until who knows where, right? And that's it, folks. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I'm sorry that got a little rushed at the end, but
Very, very
nice. So we'd like to open it up for a Q&A. I have some questions prepared, but if anyone else would like to go before me, I'd like to open up that now. You could just take yourself out mute or send a question in the chat box. It could be a couple minutes to do so.
Just this first one on the Chicago library. Yes.
Yeah.
Right? They don't want public gathering, because think about it, a public gathering in a library. You will have a bunch of socialists and anarchist people. These things are done. That's why in Northern Illinois, the public space, they made it in a way so that people will not be able to congregate. They closed down public space so that you won't protest, so that you won't march. People don't see these things. It goes right by them.
I had a quick question for you. Thanks for the talk, by the way. I was wondering if you had any thoughts on how the fact that climate change is like a collective action issue, like how that affects the ways that we're able to address it. Like, because there's kind of like the free rider problem with how we like address climate change. How do you see that like playing into the fact that we haven't made significant
And then you just hit the nail. You just hit the nail with the hammer, right? Because we don't see the environment as a collective thing. Because we don't see anything as a collective thing. It is all about individualism, self-interest. At the moment we change the state of mind, the environment will change with us. So yeah, that's why there are no advances, not real advances, because everyone is like Greta, for example, a good example, right? Is doing it on her own. You know, and yeah, she tries to get all this coalition, she tries to do this, but it's, you know, Greta is the face, and that is a problem.
Thank you.
Do you think legislation like the Select Committee on the Climate Crisis or the Green New Deal has the ability to legitimately force like a collective consciousness change like that?
Not a legislative action will not change state of minds, people. A state of mind will be changed like things like the pandemic. So hopefully this changes it. Like very big things that will change, or a whole process of education like us, right? Who we've been doing it for years. Who we've been at this for years, so we have a whole process of how this works. But for people who just hear information left and right without being framed in an educational setting, all they got is echo chambers and a lot of information that doesn't make any sense. So the way to change the state of mind is through education, and through passion, and through activism. The legislative thing is not going to change that many minds. Now, examples are plenty, right? We have the 1964 Civil Rights Act, and really, we still have racism. We have.
So how do you go from a grassroots approach to people who are oppressed? If it was like from the Black Lives Matter, poor people. I mean, when you're poor and hungry, and you got to go to work to 2 or 3 jobs and take care of your kids, how are you worrying about your garden? Do you even have a garden, or you just have a dirt space? So how do you make that grassroots? That, you know, where do you sacrifice? Where do you find the courage? All those things you say. Be empathetic. Right. How do you do it?
And Maria, and this is what I tell all my students: you better be single and don't have any children. Yeah.
Well, or
because that's exactly what prevents people from that. They put you in a marriage, they put you in a nuclear family, and they make you work all your life, so you don't even have space or time for anything else. So how do we solve that? Through collectivity. And you have, and this is what, I don't know, man, you could take, this is an extreme example, but you could take polygamy and how 5 or 7 women and 7 wives distribute all the housework so they can do other work. Obviously, it doesn't have to be polygamy. It can be done within the framework of monogamy. But what I'm saying is pulling your resources together. That's the only way we're going to change it, Maria. But they make it seem that you won't do it. So therefore, how do? You first have to remember Arthur Miller, or Jesus. That's why Jesus was single, people. And that's what Arthur Miller, the enemy of the people. If you want to be a social fighter, you better be single and don't have any attachments so you can walk away and you can do what it needs to be done. That's why, people, I have no children, 0. I can move at any time and I can do what I need to do because I know exactly what Maria said and how they get you.
Well, but couldn't we get into the communities and have like the vacant lots? Like, how do you make the vacant lots, this dirt space, better to make your community space better, right? How does someone like from the suburbs, right, who wants to make a change, right? A lot of people coming from the suburbs, going to Black Lives Matters protests, having them in suburbs. Like, how do you make a climate change? Like going in, how do you make a movement that helps with climate and green space?
Right. So let's look at history and movements that are strong, right? The civil rights movement started with religion, with the women. When you convince the women at the churches why they needed to be done. Look at Portland, when the women, the older ladies decided to go at the up front of the march. So what you're asking me, Maria, people like you need to do it, not the young people, because the young people, we can put them in jail, we can send the federal police, but if Maria is there, it's a completely different ballgame, right? Now you cannot do what you are doing. So you're asking me what you are doing, it has to be beyond young people, it has to be intragenerational movement in there so they can see that there is all these diverse people there.
Yep. No, that was kind of a planted question, Andre. I think that community, right? I mean, that's how when women started having an opinion about the Vietnam War, things changed too, right?
Right. And I go with the women here, because if you look also at the history of the France with the Romans and Christianization, they went after the women. If you look at the Spaniards in Mexico, they went after the women. You go after the women first. And if you convince the women, the community follows.
Hey, Andres, I had something like a resonance because I'm Latinx. I don't know if you can hear me.
I can. Keep going.
Okay, I can't hear myself, but basically my grandfather's side is Mayan, and in Guatemala we're seeing a lot of what you're saying happening, but in terms of like the bioreserve. So the government is pushing like, hey, you have to make these spaces national parks, but once they become national parks, they actually are more susceptible to like cartels and things like that. Whereas when they're owned by indigenous communities and ran sustainably by indigenous communities, because they have this mentality of community already ingrained in the system, you don't have any of those issues, which I think is kind of where the fallout is when you try to implement that same ideology into like an American society, is that yes, we can do it, but you have to have community as an integral part of your existence, or then it doesn't work. So it's not really a question, but just more of like a parallel.
Well, and yeah, right? Because, and again, we don't highlight community here. Just think about it, people. This has happened to me since I come from Juarez. I get to an American house, everybody's sitting, nobody offers one single bite to you. If you go to any Latin American, even if they don't have any food, people, they will offer you some. And I always thought that's why this is so fucked up. I'm still here though, but anyway, that's a different issue. So that's just a microcosm of how America has done it. And this idea that all by myself, I can do it and I don't need you. And maybe in one way, that's why America made it so great. But now we can move on from there, right? We don't have to stay on the same damn thinking. Yeah, it got us here. Now let's change it, for sure.
I was wondering if there's any movements in the world that you feel like are doing it right, like according to like this kind of coalition building, like working class perspective that you're talking about. What movements do you see that kind of embody this perspective?
Okay, like nationwide, I go back to Cuba. Cuba with all its problems and all its corruption and all its Castro cronies and all its privileges of the Communist Party, they still have public spaces, people. There is no private property. Everybody has housing. Everybody's healthcare. There is a sense of collectivity and community and prevention of equilibrium with environment, all because they have a socialist regime. Because ideas of capitalism slowly make it there. And they have a problem, right? They have all the Miami people and all the Cubans are seeing how Miami is great. But what are they seeing now? They see Florida full of COVID. They see in Florida they cannot even get to the doctor. So who's laughing at who now? The Cubans or the Floridians, right? So think about it for a second. So nationwide, I go with Cuba. Then of course, we talk about China and communism and all of that. Call it what you want, people. And of course, China is not communist, but they are the second economy in the world. And they're communists. So that goes to show you that government control economy does work and it can work. But if we make it less authoritarian than the Chinese, right? The problem with the Chinese is their authoritarianism and their tyranny, not their socialism. That's the problem. Now, to specifically get to your question, Maya, I go with Matt Ellis Ramirez here. The natives are the ones doing it right. They control their environment, they control their space, they don't let outsiders in, and they fight all of these policies to make it a pueblo mágico or a national park or whatever it is that you wanted that would only bring tourists in, would only bring investment in, and it will destroy the ecology. They want the investment, they just don't want all of this investment. They will say to you, look, come with one hotel, we deal with that. We just don't want 20 hotels. You see? It is not even a problem of being anti-development. It is just the greed of capitalism. We can work within the capitalist framework if capitalism wasn't this greedy. So who do I see, Maya? I see natives doing it. I see it in Mexico. I see it in Guatemala. I see it here in Canada and United States with the pipe. Remember, we see it with them, people, and they're fighting it.
Hey, Andres. We were wondering, we both had a question if we could double up on you, but you were talking about owning space when you were 21, no money, not even legal here. And I was just wondering how you went about that and where you looked, say, what you did with that.
Right. Great question. Because I should have got, remember, let's give some of my background. College educated parents sophisticated. I had Marx books since I was growing up in my house. I saw Charles Marx and Engels on my mom's library. I saw how the contestation and the struggle for space and property works from very young. So to answer your question is, I had the benefit of realizing these things since I was very young. I have the benefit of seeing how the value of property is. Now, as far as how do I want to do it, also follows the first answer, which is because I had these parents and they put me in a school of rich, middle-class people. I have all this network, all these connections, all these people that I knew. So for example, my first loan, guess who it was? The parent of a friend who I went in high school with, who said, no, don't worry. I'll approve you, man, because I know you're good.
Yeah.
But got an approve, you see?
Mm-hmm.
So how do you build it? And this is what I tell everybody, you network, you connection. In my classes, I force people to connect with each other and network with each other, because you never know who you're gonna help you, who's going to help you, people. You never know. The least one that you think is the one that will help you.
Thank you.
Hey, Andres, I have a question. I mean, I understand what you said because, I mean, obviously I grew up in Mexico too, and I have, you know, I think for me, when I was a kid, my parents focused a lot on my education, which is, I think, why, like, you know, even though we weren't very privileged, you know, that focused a lot on my education.
Hold on.
It's right on the table.
Yeah, I know where it is.
Yeah. All right. Cool. Okay. So sorry about that, guys. But yeah. So my question was, when I was a kid, you know, growing up in Mexico, class was a very, you know, clear thing to see among society. You know, it's like you really know it's there consciously, like all the time. It's like, you know, who are the rich people, who are the poor people, and it's very well known, like who can do this and who can do that, and like and it's a very social dynamic that it's very clear who can do this and who cannot, and why these things happen in a way. But in America, since I migrated here and I've been here, like it's very clear to me to see like how systematically this has been always, you know, purposefully not like spread around, and like a lot of people, and so this transmits into race and like other couple things, but it's very rare to see people that are conscious of class until now that it's happening thanks to all of the things that were happening. So I guess my question goes to like, how would you say would be an, you know, an approach to re-educate and reassess these things that are like systematically, I think since like J. Edgar Hoover, the 1920s, like had been systematically, you know, sort of suppressing the consciousness of people, like class, because it's a big thing, and like a lot of people have said about, you know, me that I had a background in economics is always been said like, well, the, you know, the free market and all this stuff, but we have always overseen that all these people that wrote books like Milton Friedman or Keynes or like all these economists, none of them had an analysis of class like Marx did, for example. So it's like, how do we actually start making people aware of class, and that how, and the role, the big role that it plays in our society nowadays?
You hit the nail to it. First of all, we call it American exceptionalism, right? The idea that there is no class struggle. But think about what Trump is saying about testing of COVID. If you don't get tested, you don't know. If you don't talk about it, you don't know. Don't ask, don't tell. So let's not talk about class, and nobody even, let's not bring people. And this is going to be, a lot of you are going to be like, whatever, but you have a significant other, you don't say certain things and you don't put things in their heads. Same with children. You don't put certain things in their head because then they start thinking about it. So this is the same thing with class. So it was American exceptionalism is a clear purposely decision by economic and political elites in America to don't talk about it. Let's not, it's the big elephant in the room. And you can go through life, people, 200-300 years without acknowledging the truth. How many of us lie to ourselves? I still lie to myself, and I'm 44 years old, people.
Yeah, I'd like to kind of amplify that because I'm in a corporate job now, and with the Black Lives Matter, one of the largest impacts that's happened where I work is, rather than have a fancy town hall meeting like we usually do, they just went and they said, okay, we just want to hear personal stories. So tell us what your story is. And we had upper management people saying, this is what happened to me. I was pulled over. This is what this experience was like. And so, it was like eye-opening to people to say, hey, I'm a white guy in my mid, 40s, 50s, 60s. And I grew up when segregation started, and they didn't teach us anything. They just put us together. And of course we had street fights, and then a white guy who was in California with a black woman who got pulled over for a regular traffic stop, and he thought nothing of it, but the woman immediately turned the light inside her car on. He's like, what are you doing that for? Like, the idea of how we don't know what we don't know until we start talking about it. So imagining that kind of conversation about, hey, I grew up poor, or I grew up privileged. And we use this label of white privilege. Your white privilege is showing, but we're talking past each other still, right?
Right. And just to dig into that and to answer more to the question of I don't know if it's you, Jonathan, or which one is your name?
Owen.
What's your name?
Owen.
Owen. Oh, you're Owen. What's up, homie? Yeah. So anyway, saying to Owen, I lost my train of thought of what I was going to say, so I forgot. So anyway, keep going, people.
Oh, it was
when you did start getting loans for space, what were the type of things that you looked for? Did you want to create a garden? Did you want a lot to make sure that was yours to build upon and so forth?
Yes, the garden, and I started with tomatoes and basil, and it just grew and grew and grew. And to me, that is a basic foundation block of what I want to do in the future. Make sure we're self-sufficient, that we have a group of people that think alike. People, think about this one. Trump is taking us right into anarchism, in which there's going to be people that think alike, and they're going to hang out with each other, separated from everybody else, all into one big nation. That's the future of the United States. Mark my words. This idea of united, and it's just a panacea, people. You know where we're going? We're going towards separation. We're going to where everybody's going to just chill whoever they want to. And in many ways, maybe that's the best way to go and the best way to find harmony, because together we clearly are not. That's why I'm trying to make you see that the idea of a space is to isolate ourselves from these people. We cannot change everybody's mind. That's real now. It's a waste of time. You gotta find people that think like you. You don't need to fight those of the other side. It is impossible. It is impossible. You will go insane. But you can find souls that think like you. Remember what Jesus said, I want companions, not followers. So that's the key. Find people like us. We get together, we got our private property, and we can deal with that.
Amen. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Andres. So we have to wrap up now, but I wanted to address two things. I'm wondering if you could elaborate even more on what you just said about a message of hope, maybe, for the progression of where the United States is going based off of your prediction, right? Finding people who are like-minded, like that came to this meeting. My friends, Jonathan and Owen, my fellows that I came in contact with academically and actively. My mom is here. Thank you for coming, Mom. And maybe you could jump off of that. And then after that, we did have one question for a couple book recommendations. And that's it.
All right. So the first one, the hope is within. You cannot find hope outside. You need to find the hope and the strength within. You need ultimately to know that you are by yourself, and there will be a lonely fight, that will be sacrifice, that no one will pat you in the back. Right? And there's not going to be any glamour, and yeah, and you're going to be harassed, and yeah, accept that or not. Now, in my case, it's easy for me, right? Because I have a job at a university. So I have in this position. But I was in your same position, and I was saying the same things, people. And you can go look back to Google to see this. I didn't care. Okay. I just happened to fall into it. I got lucky, whatever. But I did not behave in my life so that I will be comfortable when I'm old. This just happened that I got lucky. And they could fire me tomorrow because we're in Georgia. There is no contractual. There is no tenure here, people. They can get rid of you tomorrow. I'm going to stay saying what I say. And again, why can I do it? And I tell this all the time because I have these people, especially with Mexicans. They raise their hand and say, you don't have any children, do you? No, bro. That's why I can say these things. That's why I can do these things. Even Mel Gibson in The Patriot, right? When he's talking with the revolutionaries, well, he goes, I can afford that because I'm a parent of 7 kids. So he doesn't fight the revolution. Because who's going to take care of the 7 kids? You need to be alone or with one significant other that will also think like you. That's simple. There's plenty of people that have children, people. You don't need to be the ones.
Okay, Andre, I just have to say, some people should have babies because I had Jack, and aren't you glad that he's around?
I know that, right. In my
All his friends glad he's around.
Right.
I'm just joking. I mean, I think that, you know, people can have children and create people like you or Jack or this community that's on this call to instill in them, you know, principles of, you know, self-reliance and community is important, and taking care of a life you want, right?
Right, and yes, Maria, and don't get me wrong, right? People, I was exaggerating and hype.
Yeah.
Which I am, I do that all the time. But
yeah,
ultimately, I follow my own, and I am not having any children.
No, and that's cool. That's cool. I know people who are not, but I think the other thing that is hopeful, because this is a really hard time for this generation. You know, we didn't grow up. I didn't grow up with school loans. It was easier for us to get housing loans, car loans, whatever. They're in a really, really tough spot. So the idea of your sharing here of stick with your community, rely on people who believe the same things, I think it's very powerful. And I appreciate that hopeful tone.
One last thing, people. I remember what Owen was saying. The reason why America, and this, because he was right, out in Mexico, we realized about class right away because they make us realize about class. And here, they're very skillful to make it look like there is no problems, that everybody has access. And one big thing is access to credit, people. Latin America, you don't have any credits. Here you do. And every single one, at least if they can move and hustle and have the connections, you could get a loan. And that does take you out of poverty. And that is a ticket out that capitalism has made it look so that people like us will not be crazy resistant because they give us the conditions to be cool. Remember, ultimately, people, I should be on the border organizing these people, immigrants. Yet I am here in my house in Lawrenceville, all comfortable. Just like Bernie Sanders is in his house, right? When he's a socialist. So know that as well. If you're a true socialist, you should be on the streets. Oh, books, Spaces of Hope by David Harvey. Any book by David Harvey, people, it will open your eyes. That guy is good, all right? And of course, you can always email me at the specifics, but David Harvey is about a space. And then you look at his bibliography and all the people that write like him will be there. Some other craziers that go even crazier than Harvey. Others that are not as radical as Harvey. So I always recommend you that, right? That's what historians do. We always look at the bibliography to see who are they speaking with and about. Always do that. Always.